All right, let's talk about Japanese short rows. There are a lot of different ways to do short rows. This one just happens to be my favorite. So I'll show you how it works. And if you think this looks fun, you could try this one too and see how you like the results. I find it to be a really nice, almost invisible short row. And for whatever reason, it's just the one I like to do. So this is the soundtrack pullover for the 4-day Knitalong, and I will show you how we work the short rows for this sweater. This is the beginning of the round marker. So the instructions tell you to knit until you get to the end of the round, and then it's going to tell you to stop and turn. So we're turning to the wrong side. So even though we've been knitting in the round, we're going to knit the short row section back and forth. And a short row is really just that. It's a row that is shorter than the rest, that you're just working some extra rows to create some more depth. And that just brings that back of the neckline up a little bit for a nicer fit. So that's the only reason we're doing it. But it really is very effective. So let me show you how we do it. So we turn to the wrong side. We're going to slip that first stitch over to the right needle. And then we're going to take a locking marker, and I'm going to use a pink one so that you can see which one is which. A locking marker, place it on the working yarn. And then I'm going to just go ahead and purl all the way. See how the locking marker is just there. It's kind of on the bar between the stitches now. And that's where I want it to live. I don't want it to get squirrely and run away, which it can do. So you want to make sure it lands between those first two stitches. This first stitch is the one that I slipped, and then the second stitch is the one that I purled, and it's sitting, now don't mind this one, it's sitting right between the two. All right, now I'm going to purl until I get to the side marker. That's what this marker is. I'll purl to there, and then I'll show you what we do next. All right, I've purled to the side marker. This is the side marker, and I'm going to do the thing I did last time, which is I'm going to turn. So now I've turned it back to the right side, and this is how we are creating a systematic short row. But the technique, really, because you can do a short row without any technique, the technique is to make it look pretty smooth so you don't get a gap. So that's really all the technique is about. So we're turning it to the right side. We're going to slip the first stitches of knitting it. This marker right here is the side marker. So we're going to slip that first stitch without knitting it. Then we're going to take our locking marker. This is a second extra marker. So we have two pink ones now. And I'm going to lock it on the working yarn and make sure it stays between the stitch I just slipped and the next stitch. Okay, so there it is. It's locked on the bar between them. Hopefully you can see that. Now I'm going to knit back until I get to this stitch that I had. You can see where this gap is. So I'm going to knit on the right side back to the gap, and then we're going to deal with this extra spot that we marked, and that's how we're going to close up this gap to keep working the short row. So I'll pause and I'll come back when I get there. All right, I've knit back, and I wanted to not get all the way there because I kind of wanted to show you what you're doing as you're getting closer. So back here is the locked stitch. Here is the beginning of the round marker. So what we're essentially doing, you can see where that gap is right there. So we're going to knit to the gap. And then we're going to bring that locked stitch. See it right there? We're going to bring it, hopefully it's in focus here. We're going to bring it up to the left needle and put that stitch on the needle. So we'll take that locking marker off. So now we have it here. Now you're going to be dealing with this stitch marker. Try and keep it out of your way because you still need to know where it is, but it is going to be in the way for a second. Go ahead and knit these stitches together. I actually ended up kind of knitting through that stitch with the locking marker. So I'm going to adjust it and move it back so it's up here on the needle. But now I have, in fact, I'll do it right now. Now I have closed the gap for that row. Here's where it belongs, right here. You can also just take it off and reposition it if you need to. And then I'll knit one stitch to move just slightly past the section that we've adjusted with our short row. So we have You can kind of see already the short row doesn't go there, but it's starting to get a little bit wider back here. Now this is a darker yarn, so it might be a little harder to see. Now it's time to do the same thing again. Stop, turn, slip the first stitch, place the locking marker on the working yarn, just like we did before, and slide it up because we want it to stay there. And then we're going to, kind of got to get it out of your way. Then we're going to purl. We're going to move that one out of the way. Purl around to the other gap. Okay? When we get there, I'll show you what to do on the gap on the purl side because it's actually a little bit different. It's not worked the same way. All right, I've purled on the wrong side. I've purled right past our Japanese short row marker to the gap. So I've purled to the gap. Here is our side marker. And so I want to show you, now the side marker is going to be a little bit in the way. I'm going to move it for a second, but when you're doing this, you're just going to want to kind of move it out of the way, but I just don't want it to be too distracting. So for you, just kind of keep it over here, move it out of the way, and do the next part. But for me, just so you don't get confused by seeing too many markers, I just want to show you what we do next. So we want to bring up the bar that you've attached with this locking marker, and we want to put it on the needle. But if we bring it up and put it on the left needle and purl it through with the next stitch, it's gonna still be visible on the other side. So there's an extra step that you have to do when you're on the purl side. So what you'll do is you'll slip this first stitch over to the right needle without working it. Then you'll pull this little bar up and slide it over to the left needle, and then replace that stitch back to the left needle. So then we can detach it, this marker. Now we can purl these two stitches together. So you see what we did? We took the little locked stitch, but we put it behind the next stitch. And now we'll purl them together. And by doing so, it actually makes it more invisible on the front. So once we've done that, we'll purl one extra stitch, and then we'll turn back to the front. Now remember, I'm gonna have to replace my side marker there. It's gonna go right between those two. But then what I'll do next is slip the first stitch. I'm going to just put this back on. Slip the first stitch without knitting it. And then I'm going to go ahead and knit the rest of the way around until I get back to the other gap. And we're just doing the same thing every time. See how there's a gap here? We'll just knit to the gap, pull that strand up and knit it together with the next stitch. Knit one, turn, and purl back the other way. So you're repeating this process for as many times as the pattern says to do, and that's how we create that extra height in the top back neck of the sweater. And that's all it is. A short row is really just a row that is worked short. You don't finish it all the way around. You turn and go back and you knit it flat a little bit, and then you continue forward in the round. So the technique is only to help close gaps and make it less noticeable. That's the only reason we have short row techniques, because technically you could just stop and purl and then knit and then purl and then knit and then start knitting around again, but you would end up with a couple of gaps. So that's what we do with the short rows, is it just helps us do it in a way that's a little bit less noticeable, sometimes almost invisible, which is really cool. So that's how you work the short rows. And on the final round, you'll just close those gaps up when you get back to working in the round on the right side and you're finished with your short rows. When you get to the gap, you'll just make sure and knit it together with the last thread that you have by pulling it up, knitting together, closing that gap, and you'll finish off the round and keep going like normal.